Victoria from Greeley, one of my favorite cities. My brother lives in Greeley. I used to live in Fort Collins, and so Northern Colorado is a very special place. Of course, hi, Rebecca from Texarkana, Leslie from Neosho, San Marcos is here, and good morning, Tommy. So we are really glad to have everybody here. Hi, Jennifer. And I am not in my office today. I am at the Transforming Local Government Conference at TLG, which we are hosting this week. And it is in Tampa, Florida. And so really different location for me. There's Dr. Willingham joining us from his pickup. Of course, Scott's one of our facilitators and a great leader and also a rancher. And we love that you're with us, Scott. Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Mike Mallory. I'm the president of Leadership Development and Strategic Foresight for SGR and the host of Wednesday webinars. Really glad that you're here. And each month on the second Wednesday of the month, it's our privilege to have our good friend and colleague, Randy Mayeux, to present an executive book briefing. And many of you are familiar with Randy, but just in case you aren't, Randy, for I want to say 20 plus years, has been doing executive book briefings, both in the private sector and with us through SGR in local government, of leading business leadership books, sometimes dealing with some really difficult topics, sometimes dealing with basic leadership principles, but he does a phenomenal job of giving us an overview of the book and the really crucial insights. And he may say this too, but sometimes I've heard him say he reads these books so that we don't have to. Because if you follow along with the outline that we sent you, and I'll also put that in the chat box here in just a moment, you'll really get a strong sense of what this book is about. And this book is one of my favorites. It's one that I've read. It's by Adam Grant. It's called Hidden Potential. And Randy asked me earlier, say a word about why you chose this book for this webinar, and I'll get right to it. One of our responsibilities as a leader, if you have anyone that you have the responsibility to manage and to direct, to guide, one of your roles is to be a teacher. One of your roles is to develop the people who support you and report to you. And I love this book because it points out to us the fact that leadership is not being charismatic. It's not being an extrovert or an introvert. It's a set of learned behaviors, of disciplines and practices and mindsets. And this book sort of unlocks that and helps us to see how we can cultivate that in ourselves, as well as the people who we have responsibility for. And, one of the things I would encourage you to think about is getting your team each month to watch this webinar, even if you can't watch every week, to watch the one Randy does, and then gather them together following it and debrief on the book, on what you've heard Randy talk about. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. Without further ado, Randy, welcome. We're so glad you're with us. We appreciate it. And I want to turn it over to you as you share with us the briefing of Hidden Potential by Adam Grant.
Thanks, Mike. I do a couple of things here at the beginning. I cannot see you all, but I've taken my headphones off. So, Mike, just wave your arms if you can hear me okay.
All right, just good. Right.
Sure of that. Now, a word or two before we launch into the handout for Hidden Potential. Mike said that I've been doing this for over 20 years. The fact is that last Friday, April 5th, 2024, I finished the 26th year and began the 27th year of an event in Dallas called the First Friday Book Synopsis, where virtually all of these presentations are first born. And 2 books a month, every month, since April of 1998. And so I personally have prepared with that book event and with another book event on poverty and homelessness. I have personally prepared over 620 handouts and thorough briefings or synopses of business books and books on poverty and homelessness. It is my belief that reading books and learning what is in the books is the deepest dive for learning. And I'm always honored that SGR wants to include these in these webinars. This week, I presented a book called Atomic Habits for a mid-sized city in North Texas. I did It's Your Ship just a couple of weeks ago for the city of Denton, Texas. I do these for city governments and for leadership teams, and I could keep going on the number of books that I have done and the ones that are popular. As we begin, I want you to keep your pen handy, and I want you to write down on the bottom a book title. It's by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It is Extreme Ownership. And in that book, there is a very blunt statement about when to get rid of a fellow person on a team. But it's the lines he uses before you get rid of them. He says, after you have taught, mentored, coached, and corrected, then if the person cannot provide what the team needs, you have to make the tough decision. But that little line, after you have taught and mentored and coached and corrected, whatever leadership is, it is helping people become what they could become if somebody helped them. And that's what leadership is all about. Nobody comes fully formed. Nobody is their best at the outset. They have to have help. I can think of people in my life that gave me correction and suggestion and mentoring that helped me become, if I'm of any value of anyone today, what I am today. Now, any deficiencies are still my fault, but I could not be what I am without the people who helped shape me. And your job is to shape people. This book is really a statement that everybody, this is my word, is shapeable. Everyone can become more than they were. Look at the title and the subtitle of this book, Hidden Potential, the Science of Achieving Greater Things. And the reason the word science is important is this book is based on research on how people have become more than they would have been without what was done with them and for them. And so it's science. It's not art. It's science. Do this, and this can be the likely outcome. Now, I have one more thing for you to write here on the bottom left. You've got some white space. This is the fourth book that I have presented by Adam Grant. And so Adam Grant is now worth studying as kind of a clump of books. The first one I did was Give and Take. And he says, basically, there are givers and there are takers. And he's a little higher on givers. The second book I did by him was Originals. And it's a book on inventiveness and innovation and how people find new ways to do things. It's a really good read. The third book, and I'm going to be a little honest here, I think it's his best book, and I think it's his most important book, is called Think Again. And you have to think a second time. You have to rethink. You have to unlearn and then learn anew. I really love that book. But for our purposes today, his fourth book, Hidden Potential, he actually wrote one more that it wasn't quite about business, so I did not present it. But Hidden Potential is a book about developing people. Now, we're going to fly through this because this is shorter on this webinar than when I go to a city and have an hour to an hour and a half, and even sometimes nearly 2 hours on one book. On the front of the sheet, it's not where you start, it's what you've overcome, how you keep advancing. Everyone has hidden potential. It is the job of every teacher, coach, manager, leader to beckon forth that potential. Boy, that is absolutely right. If you are a leader, if you have people reporting to you, and you have a fixed mindset where you believe they can only reach so high and that's it. This is from Carol Dweck, the book Mindset. If you think they can't keep going, can't keep growing, can't keep developing, you need to resign and get somebody in there who believes that people can become more. You've got to have a growth mindset that everyone can grow. This book is oozing the concept of growth mindset. And so it's the job of every teacher and coach and manager and leader to beckon forth the potential within each person. Why is this book worth our time? Number one, this book is a motivation tutorial. It really will motivate you to look for what could become true and capable among people. Number two, this book is a corrective to so much false and misguided thinking about the path or the paths to success. And number three, this book is a call to help everyone add their gifts to a better world for all. Now, we're going to do a little jumping around, so turn all the way in your handout to page 8, to a page that looks like this. Page 8. These are the most important excerpts, the thesis quotes from the book. I read through the book, I look for the quotes that give the essence of the book. I'm going to read the ones in bold, and whenever you see something in bold on the handout, that is my emphasis, or even in larger font, although I don't think I'd use the larger font on this handout. So anyway, in bold, here we go. I think there is a brilliant child locked inside every student. Marva Collins. Look at the next bold quote. Getting better is a worthy accomplishment in and of itself. I want to explain how we can improve at improving. Circle that phrase, improve at improving. I love that phrase. We can all improve at our improving, and we can help people improve at their improving. The next bold quote. Few of us are lucky enough to have a coach like Maurice Ashley. I'm about to tell you the story about Maurice Ashley. We don't always have access to the ideal mentors, and our parents and teachers aren't always equipped to provide the right scaffolding, the foundational step-by-step undergirding. My aim is for this book to be that scaffolding. And then drop down to the bottom two on this page. When we admire great thinkers and doers and leaders, we often focus narrowly on their performance. That leads us to elevate the people who have accomplished the most and overlook the ones who have achieved the most with the least. The true measure of your potential is not the height of the peak you've reached, but how far you've climbed to get there. I wish we could just kind of have a long conversation about that quote. We live in a world where we always want to mention the greatest of the greatest, the Michael Phelps, the Michael Jordans, the brilliance of the best of the best. But there are so many who have worked so diligently and come so far. I wish we had time to talk about that. On the bottom of the page, of all the factors that have been studied, the strongest known force in daily motivation is, circle this phrase, a sense of progress. I see that I am making progress. Maybe not every day, but over the course of time, progress. I can see it. I can sense it. People can see it. My youngest son, our youngest son, played baseball. He's now a baseball coach of select baseball for his two sons. One of them is 9 years old. And so this weekend, we went to the 9-year-old baseball tournament. our team, our grandson's team came in second. 5 games for the weekend for 9-year-olds. By the way, an aside, I've decided that if there is a heaven, there is a very special place in heaven for umpires of 9-year-old baseball games. I mean, they are really something. So anyway, we remember watching Riley, our grandson, when he was at, T-ball. You put it on a tee and you hit it. And he could barely catch it and barely throw it and barely hit it. Now he's 9 years old. He's a pitcher. He had a hit that was just magnificent. The progress we have seen. It's easy to see in children as they get older. But you need to find a way to see the progress among the people you work with. Okay, turn to page 9. Now, if we had time, I could tell you all of these stories. It says some stories. The book is filled with them. I'm going to tell a few. I'm reading, the wildly successful, accomplished inner city middle school chess team, the Raging Rooks. Coach Maurice Ashley and his determined players. Maurice Ashley is a wonder. He took this inner city group of kids, many of them poor, minority kids, and he developed a chess team. And he taught them chess. How good did they get? They ended up winning championships, beating, all the kids with more privilege who had, all of these private coaches. Maurice Ashley developed the kids into chess players of excellence. Now, in this part of the handout, anything in italics comes directly from the book I'm reading. But the biggest surprise isn't that the underdogs won. It's why they won. The skills they developed would eventually earn them much more than chess titles. They took their time, and they were absolutely poker-faced at the chessboard. I've never seen kids that age so cool. They were like professionals. He was always conveying life lessons without being heavy-handed. It was less about executing a chess plan than understanding of self and mastery of self. Hope you'll circle that phrase. Understanding of self and mastery of self. That was pivotal in my life, said this person named Francis. Let me comment. Leadership is a whole lot about self-understanding. And I did my graduate work in rhetoric. And the old definition of rhetoric is that it is the art of finding the available means of persuasion. Well, the reality is that all persuasion is self-persuasion. If I can make you do something, that's coercion. But if I give you the tools where you decide to do it for yourself and you do it for yourself, that's self-persuasion. And all progress comes from within the self. And so a coach and a teacher and a mentor somehow has to beckon this forth from people. And so I really like this phrase, understanding of self and mastery of self. I put this next one in bold. So when he first showed up to introduce the game to a group of 6th graders, this is Maurice, the coach, he did it backward. He put a handful of pieces on the board and began at the end game. By teaching the game in reverse, Maurice lit a fire of determination. Once students knew how to corner a king, they had a route to victory. They were learning to treat a solitary game as a pro-social exercise in teamwork. When a player cried at nationals, it wasn't because he lost. He was devastated that he had let his teammates down. What makes a difference is not the activity, but the lessons you learn. As Maurice says, the achievement is in the growing. Underline that phrase. The achievement is in the growing. So if you read that section of the book, here are kids who learn chess. They lay in bed at night and play chess games on the ceiling of their room. They just are immersed in chess, but they are immersed in getting better. And it teaches them the discipline to get better in multiple things, and their lives are more successful, which is exactly what all teaching and coaching is. Okay, I won't have time to talk that much about the other stories. Steve Martin was terrible until he was great, the great comedian, and he tells the story of how he learned how to write things out precisely. And that was part of what happened. The second bullet point, along the way, he grew to love writing, and it opened the door to his acting career. If not for his newfound writing skills, he would never have written and starred in his breakout movie, The Jerk. There's a story about a woman who conquered Mount Everest, and she kept going. And there's this great story about the basketball great on the Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry, who was the great three-point shooter. He did not have the discipline. He was not sought after. He was not expected to be good. But a coach who saw something in him taught him how to practice, this is fun, by making it fun. He created little games, and Steph Curry began playing these games in practice, and he became better. Drop down a couple. The first Black U.S. naval officers. Oh, man, this is great. They're called the Golden 13. Since Navy tradition held that for everyone would make the cut, other officer candidates tended to see one another as rivals, not teammates. The Golden 13, these Black officer candidates, met in their barracks. One of them had this expertise, one of them had that expertise. They were not able to pass and achieve their officer status on their own, but they would teach each other. They pulled for each other. They taught each other. And there's a great story at the end where there's a room full of Black officers, Black men and women who were officers, and they all traced it back to the Golden 13. Notice this one line about why Einstein was a terrible teacher. He could not remember what it was like to be a beginner. Circle that phrase. He could not remember what it was like being a beginner. In order to be a teacher, you have this curse of knowledge. That's something from the Heath brothers in Made to Stick. You assume that the people you're teaching already know more than they know. They don't. You've got to put yourself back in the position of a beginner. What was it like to be a beginner? So hidden potential has that capability. Okay, we're going to go down next. Let's start here. The child prodigies are seldom the best later in life. They were stunned to discover that only a handful of these high achievers had been child prodigies. In other words, somebody who's really good really quickly, they don't have to work as hard at getting better. Whereas somebody who starts lower down, but aspires to being great, works and works and works. My sport field was tennis. I was a ranked tennis player 1,000 years ago. And I remember two players, I won't name them. They were both great, but small. They weren't big enough. They were a little scrawny. They weren't big enough to become great tennis players. They were better than most, but they weren't big enough. They didn't have the physical breadth and height to be great. But one of them became a really accomplished teacher, coach of professional players because he understood what it took to work at getting better. So that's not in the book, but I thought of that as I read it. Maybe a key, we're at the bottom now, is scaffolding. In construction, scaffolding is a temporary structure that enables work crews to scale heights beyond their reach. A teacher or coach offers initial instruction and then removes the support. Character skills, circle the phrase character skills, because this book is a big fan of character skills. They aren't always enough to travel great distances. Many new skills don't come with a manual, and steeper hills often require a lift. That lift comes in the form of scaffolding, a temporary support structure that enables us to scale heights we could not reach on our own. Turn to page 10. And I hope you are learning that it's worth it to circle phrases. You can go back and revisit these. Here are the big lessons from this book. It's a bunch of them. First, make learning fun. Play. If they were singled out by their coaches, it was not for unusual aptitude, but unusual motivation. That motivation wasn't innate. It tended to begin with a coach or teacher who made learning fun. And that's what happened with Steph Curry. He had a private coach who invented games to make learning these difficult shots and these difficult skills fun. Next, it's not starting place. It's progress, including especially progress in the face of genuine adversity. Now, if we had a life where there was never any adversity, this wouldn't be a problem. But we are filled with challenges that bring adversity. You know, I'm sure you have been thinking, what would it be like to be involved in the emergency management and the cleanup and the clearing out work facing Baltimore after this bridge collapse? Boy, the lessons they are going to learn. And so they'll be making progress so that the next such incident, they'll have learned things. If we judge people, I'm reading now, only by what they can do on day one, their potential remains hidden. You can't tell where people will land from where they begin. Look at the next major point. It's the soft skills stupid. When students were taught by more experienced kindergarten teachers, their fourth grade teachers rated them higher on 4 key attributes. So did their 8th grade teachers. The capacities to be proactive, pro-social, disciplined, and determined stayed with students longer and ultimately proved more powerful than early math and reading skills. For too long, character skills like proactivity and determination have been dismissed as soft skills, but it is the soft skills. And if you're lucky enough to have a kindergarten teacher who teaches you the skills to develop kind of on your own with proaction, you are taking the action yourself. I didn't have this written down, so I'm going to draw a total brain freeze. But the 7 habits of highly effective people, one of them is you take the lead on that. I'm not remembering the phrase. That's embarrassing. Okay, next major point. Character equals a set of skills. Character is not just an internal belief in integrity, but it's a set of skills. I now see character less as a matter of will, writes Adam Grant, and more as a set of skills. Character is more than just having principles. It's a learned capacity to live by your principles. Character skills do more than help you perform at your peak. They propel you to higher peaks. Drop down to the next one. Don't ask for feedback. This is interesting. This is a vocabulary lesson from Adam Grant. Don't ask somebody to give you feedback. Ask them for advice. What advice would you give me? That's a more tangible question than feedback. Just start. And so the idea of speaking from day one has changed how I think about learning. You can code from day one, teach from day one, coach from day one. You don't need to get comfortable before you can practice your skills. Your comfort grows as you practice your skills. Have high standards, yes, but do not be a perfectionist. Perfectionists don't know any other way to be, and they're not all that great teachers because they demand perfection, which most of us can never attain. Extensive evidence shows that it's having high personal standards, but not pursuing perfection that fuels growth. And take some breaks during the day, during the calendar year. Take some breaks. I just finished presenting for the first time Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. He earlier wrote Deep Work, great books. And Cal Newport says you can work flat out for a few weeks or months, and then you need a legitimate, serious break. And he talked about famous authors and other people who took serious, legitimate breaks. Now, this is really interesting. Right here. Well, this is a surprise, and/or isn't this interesting? Learning style differences are not really real. Now, you may have an initial rejection of that, but read the book. The research backs it up. There's just one small problem with learning styles. They're a myth. Here's a quote. There is no adequate evidence base to justify incorporating learning styles assessments into general educational practice. The way you learn, the way you like to learn is what makes you comfortable, but it isn't necessarily how you learn best. Now, I'm building up to the high point of one reason I really like this book. Here it is, right here. It's bold, right here near the bottom of page 10. Reading books really is better than listening to books if your goal is to learn. Now, I have worked very diligently in creating handouts of book briefings that give you enough of the book that if you reread this once on your own in a few days, word for word, this book would sink in a little more. But ideally, you read the book and then reread the handout and you reinforce. But there's a quote in here. It's about people who took a test after listening to the material and reading the material, and reading is where people learn best. So I'm a little biased and wanted that to be true, but I was glad to see that it was true. All right, at the bottom of the page, write to learn, and then teach others in order to learn yourself. Every time I present a book briefing, it's like rereading the book. When I read it, I read it. Then I prepare the handout. That's almost like reading it a second time. Then I present it. That's almost like reading it the third time. Teaching you teaches me. And self-taught, self-learning really can work if you tackle it seriously. Turn to page 11, the top of the page. The big lesson. Do something now. Get better at it. Use every activity as a means to grow and get better. Now, we're going to do a little odd thing here before I wrap this up and turn it back to Mike Mowry. Turn to page 2. And what we have for a number of pages are the best of my highlighted passages. So these are all directly from the book. the best of Randy's highlighted passages. I start with many more pages and I reduce it to these for the handout. So on the left, under the book image, people who make major strides are rarely freaks of nature. They're usually freaks of nurture. I like that phrase. All right, number one, I'm going to read just a few of these very quickly. Number one, what any person in the world can learn, almost all persons can learn. The lead psychologist concluded, if provided with appropriate conditions of learning. Number six, what counts is not how hard you work, but how much you grow. And growth requires much more than a mindset. It begins with a set of skills that we normally overlook. Look at page 3, number 20. Chess, from one of the players that Maurice coached, developed my character. Chess increased my concentration and focus. Chess ignited me. Someone lit a star that will keep burning as long as I live. Turn to page 4. You can see that I'm just giving you a couple of these highlights. Number 37, the popular adage, use it or lose it, doesn't go far enough. If you don't use it, you might never gain it in the first place. I like that. So you've got to keep at it. All right, look at page 5, number 55. I like to break trustworthiness down into 3 components: care, credibility, and familiarity. If they don't care about you, they haven't earned the right for you to care about their reactions. If they're not qualified to judge the task or close enough to know your potential, you can discount their views and prove them wrong. But if they've demonstrated that you matter to them and they know the domain and your skills, they're offering information to improve yourself. One more, page 6, number 77. Put a star beside 77, especially if you're a parent. If we want our kids to enjoy reading, we need to let them see us read. Children pay attention to our attention. Where we focus tells them what we prize. Well, let me wrap up by turning back to page 11 and reading my 6 lessons and takeaways. Number 1, you have much higher to climb. Start climbing, keep climbing. Number 2, read more, a lot more. Read in order to learn. I don't know of leaders who are not in some way getting input from great books. So read books. Number 3, be wary of saying things that harm the dream of others. Number 4, teach people to function in groups and teams. Be wary of allowing the big voices drowning out the quieter voices. Put a star beside number 4. I did not have time to read you that section in the handout, but big bombastic voices silence the other voices, and that takes away initiative and growth. Number 5, learn to learn well. Be comfortable with mistakes, with looking and sounding silly or dumb on the road to competence and then mastery. And number 6, this commitment to helping people find and reach their potential is a societal survival skill. Embrace the challenge. Hidden potential, the science of achieving greater things. I hope you found this useful. Mike Mowry, back to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Randy. I mean, what a fascinating book. And I love, Adam Grant, just like you do. I think I've read just about everything he's written. And this is one of the most stimulating books. I mean, there's some things that I know I reacted to, and probably some of the people that heard this book briefing did too. I want to ask you, What's your biggest takeaway from this book, Randy?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that if I were to try to learn any new thing, it's learnable. I think that's it. There are things that I give up too quickly, and if I put the time in and ask somebody who knew what it was to help me a little bit, I could learn some new stuff. And so I think that it is the idea that I have plenty of room to grow in many arenas that I have never tackled. So that's one. The other big takeaway is if you're a leader, it really is your job to believe in the potential of the people you lead and help them bring it out of them. So I think that's a critical takeaway.
Yeah, I agree. For me, that's one of my, excuse me, one of my top ones, because I see, excuse me, leaders that do that. They have men and women on their teams that maybe others would look at them and say, well, they don't have a lot of potential, but a good leader gets so much out of them, and helps them climb and helps them develop. And many of you in local government, that's what you're doing. And I want to salute you and acknowledge that and say, from SGR's perspective, we see that all the time. We're really proud to be partners with you in that endeavor. And don't quit, keep it up. And one of the ways that you can do that is to take advantage of book briefings like this from Randy.
Yeah. Mike, let me say something that you said to me once. I think this is valuable for everybody. In city government, and boy, this is a blunt statement, there are some cities that do no investing in people development and leadership development. They just kind of don't pay attention to that. And the fact is, you owe it to your people to help them develop. And no, that's not enough. You don't owe it to your people. You owe it to your people, but you also owe it to your city to develop the people that serve the city. So that's something that comes to mind as I think about this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, great job, Randy. I love the presentation as always. It was fantastic. I want to encourage you, if you're watching, whether it's watching on YouTube or you're watching it live, think about some creative ways that you can extend the learning. Make the handout available to your team. Let them, you'll receive a copy of this, a link to it on our YouTube station or channel. You can get them to watch it there, have some discussions about it. Lots of ways to use it. Read this book. This is a great book, and you'll be stimulated by so many great stories. So, Randy, I look forward to having you back again the second week of May for the next book briefing. And we encourage all of you to join us for all of our webinars. Next week, we'll be talking about what we've learned from TLG, of the Transforming Local Government Conference, and how you can be more innovative wherever you are and what you're doing. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Randy, and everyone have a great day. We'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.